In the damp bowels of a Renaissance fortress, torchlight flickered across walls, stained by centuries of screams. The air smelled of rust and sweat, heavy with the memory of those who never left. At the heart of this chamber stood a single iron chair, bolted to the stone floor. Beside it rested a monstrous device of gleaming steel, its curved frame and turning screws glinting like the jaws of a beast waiting to feed. The Inquisitors called it La Rompecabezas, the head crusher. The year was 1578, and Europe was drunk on paranoia. Heresy, treason, and witchcraft were words whispered like curses in every marketplace and court. In Florence, the ruling council had declared a new wave of purification, determined to expose those who questioned the Church's word or the Duke's will. And that was how Tomaso di Fiori, a scholar, poet, and critic of blind faith, found himself dragged into the fortress dungeon at midnight, wrists bound in iron, eyes wide with disbelief. The Inquisitor awaited him, Don Matteo, known throughout Tuscany for his calm cruelty. His face was clean-shaven, his robes immaculate, his tone polite, as he gestured toward the iron chair. "Sit, Signor Fiori," he said softly. "Confession is the key to salvation." Tomaso refused. He had spent years studying reason, science, and truth. He believed knowledge was light, not heresy. But Don Matteo smiled, for he had heard such pride before. He turned toward the torturer, a massive man with scarred hands, and gave a simple nod. The torturer approached the iron chair, wiping dust from its cold seat as if preparing a throne. He forced Tomaso down, binding his chest and arms with leather straps that dug deep into his flesh. The head crusher was lifted from its stand, a steel cap with a threaded screw descending from above. Beneath the cap, a metal chin rest waited, sharp-edged, forcing the victim to stare forward, unable to turn away. Tomaso's breathing grew shallow as the cap was placed atop his head, its inner surface cold and tight against his skull. Don Matteo leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you deny writing that the heavens are moved by nature, not divine hand?" Tomaso clenched his teeth. "Truth does not fear torture," he said. The Inquisitor's smile faded. He gave another nod. The torturer grasped the handle and began to turn. The first turn was almost gentle, a low groan of metal as pressure descended onto Tomaso's skull. His eyes blinked rapidly as his scalp began to stretch, the pain sharp but bearable. The Inquisitor asked again, "Do you confess to heresy?" Tomaso spat blood. "No." The second turn came, slower, crueler. The iron pressed deeper, squeezing bone against bone. Tomaso's jaw trembled as his teeth ground together. A trickle of blood ran from his nose. Outside the chamber, a storm raged, thunder echoing like distant drums of war. Inside, only the squeal of the turning screw broke the silence. The third turn came. A deep crack echoed through the room, faint but unmistakable. Tomaso's skull was beginning to fracture. He gasped, his vision blurring, a sharp whine filling his ears. The Inquisitor leaned close enough that Tomaso could see his reflection in the man's cold eyes. "The Lord forgives those who speak the truth," Matteo whispered. But Tomaso refused still. His words came as a ragged hiss. "It is not truth you seek, only obedience." The fourth turn. The torturer grunted with effort as the screw tightened further. Tomaso's eyes bulged, his face contorted as veins swelled across his temples. Blood streamed from his nose and ears, dripping onto his tunic. His screams tore through the chamber, bouncing off the walls like dying echoes of humanity itself. Don Matteo motioned for the turning to stop. "He is close," he said. "Let him breathe." The cap was loosened slightly but not removed. Tomaso slumped forward, his chest heaving. In his mind, images flickered. His study filled with books, the sunlight through the window, the laughter of his young daughter, Isabella. That memory alone gave him the strength to whisper, "You cannot crush a thought." The Inquisitor's lips twitched. "Perhaps not," he murmured. "But we can crush the thinker." He signaled again. The torturer resumed. The fifth turn shrieked through the air, followed by a horrifying crunch. Tomaso's teeth cracked under the immense pressure, his mouth filled with iron-tasting blood. His vision turned red, then black, then exploded into light. The pain no longer felt human. It became a fire that consumed his mind. Don Matteo's voice echoed, distant and hollow. "Confess, Tomaso di Fiori. Confess that your words defied heaven." The scholar's mouth opened, trembling. Perhaps to speak, perhaps to scream. But no sound came. The next turn would end him, the Inquisitor knew. Yet he hesitated. "Release him," he ordered suddenly. "He will write his confession tomorrow. Let him remember the mercy of the Church." The torturer loosened the cap. As the metal lifted, a patch of skin tore away, leaving Tomaso's scalp slick with blood. He collapsed forward, unconscious, head lolling against his chest. Don Matteo turned away, washing his hands in a bowl of rose water. "Mercy," he repeated, as though trying to convince himself of the word. In the corner of the chamber, 2 guards whispered. They had seen dozens broken under that same device. Thieves, women accused of witchcraft, even priests who questioned too loudly. Some confessed before the 5th turn, others died at the 6th, but none had resisted as long as Tomaso. One guard crossed himself. "He'll die before morning," he muttered. The other nodded. "Then God will judge whether his truth was worth the pain." Above the dungeon, the city of Florence slept, unaware of the cries beneath its cobblestones. The bells of the Duomo tolled 3 times, echoing through empty streets. Somewhere in the dark, Isabella, Tomaso's daughter, awoke suddenly, her small hands clutching her blanket. She didn't know why, but tears filled her eyes. She whispered a prayer her father had taught her. "Let truth survive, even when men do not." Down below, Tomaso stirred, barely alive. The torturer extinguished the torches, leaving the chamber in darkness. Only the faint glimmer of moonlight slipped through the bars above, falling across the iron device, the head crusher, now streaked with fresh blood. The metal gleamed like something alive, something that had feasted and would feast again. And in that stillness, the fortress seemed to hum with memory, as if every scream, every confession, every crushed skull had sunk into the stone itself, whispering through the years that mercy in those days was just another form of cruelty. The dawn came slow and grey over Florence, its light unable to pierce the thick mist that clung to the fortress walls. Inside the dungeon, Tomaso di Fiori lay on the cold floor, breathing in ragged gasps. His face was swollen, his lips split, his hair matted with dried blood. Each heartbeat was a hammer in his skull, a dull, echoing agony from the wounds the head crusher had left. But he was alive, and that, to the Inquisitors, meant he could still be useful. A bucket of icy water was thrown across his face. Tomaso gasped, his eyes snapping open. The guard sneered down at him. "Wake up, philosopher. The master wants your confession before he eats." Tomaso tried to speak, but could only manage a hoarse croak. He had no idea how long he'd been unconscious, hours, maybe an eternity. When they dragged him through the corridors, the smell of old blood and oil followed. He was brought not to the torture chamber this time, but to a narrow room lit by a single window barred with iron. A wooden desk stood before him, with parchment, quill, and ink. Seated there was Don Matteo the Inquisitor, as serene as a priest at prayer. "Ah, Signor Fiori," he said softly, "you have survived what others could not. That is a sign. Perhaps heaven has not yet forsaken you." Tomaso stared at him through half-shut eyes. "Heaven," he rasped, "would not sit beside men like you." The Inquisitor's expression didn't change. "Perhaps," he replied, "but heaven uses us, as it must. You will write, Tomaso. You will confess that your words, those dangerous thoughts of reason and rebellion, were born of the devil. You will sign it, and you will be free to die, with a clear soul." The word "right" echoed in Tomaso's mind like a cruel joke. His hands trembled violently when they placed the quill before him. His fingertips were purple from the straps that had bound him, his knuckles cracked and raw. He stared at the parchment, blank, waiting, patient. All his life he had loved the sight of paper. It had been the vessel of ideas, of poetry, of truth. Now it had become a tool of erasure. Don Matteo watched him carefully. "You see, my son," he said in a tone almost fatherly, "pain purifies. The crusher opened your body so your soul might listen." Tomaso coughed blood into his sleeve. and looked up slowly. "You think pain brings truth," he whispered, "but it only breeds silence." The Inquisitor leaned forward, his calm cracking for the first time. "Then let silence consume you," he hissed. "If your pen will not move, your skull will break once more." He gestured toward the door. The torturer entered, the same brute as before, his massive frame filling the room. Over his shoulder he carried the head crusher, freshly polished, gleaming in the weak light. Tomaso's pulse quickened. He could still feel the iron's ghost pressing against his skull. Don Matteo stood, "One turn for every lie you refuse to renounce." He motioned for the torturer to approach. The metal cap was placed gently upon Tomaso's head again, its coldness biting into the half-healed wounds. The screw hovered above him like the hand of an invisible god. "Now," the Inquisitor said, "confess that man's reason is a temptation of Satan." Tomaso closed his eyes. In that moment he saw Isabella's face again, her smile, her dark curls, her laughter echoing through their small courtyard. He thought of the book he had been writing when they came for him, a treatise on truth and faith, dedicated to her. If he confessed now, his words would be erased. His name would survive only as a heretic's stain. And if he refused, he would die. But his defiance might outlive him. The torturer's hand hovered over the crank. Tomaso spoke, his voice steady now. "You may crush my head, but not my reason." The Inquisitor's lips curved into a faint smile. "So be it." The screw began to turn. The sound was soft but unmistakable, a metallic whine that grew louder with every fraction of pressure. The cap descended again, biting into Tomaso's scalp. He winced, teeth gritted, but no sound escaped him this time. The Inquisitor stood inches from him, studying his face as though observing an experiment. "Remarkable," he murmured, still proud. The second turn came, and blood began to bead at Tomaso's temple. His breath came in short, broken bursts. His jaw trembled violently as the pressure mounted. His eyes darted toward the parchment still lying blank on the table. He could almost hear his own thoughts shouting, "Write something, save yourself, lie if you must," but he didn't move. Don Matteo tilted his head, curiosity replacing anger. "Why suffer, Tomaso? No one will know your words but me. History will not remember your silence." Tomaso forced a smile through his agony. "Then history will remember your cruelty." The Inquisitor's face darkened. "Enough," he said sharply. He gestured for the torturer to stop. Then, with slow deliberation, he stepped close and whispered, "You think this is about truth? It is about power. The Church endures because men like me silence men like you." He reached down, dipped the quill into ink and pressed it into Tomaso's shaking hand. "Sign it. Say the devil misled you. Do it, and you may live to see your child again." The mention of Isabella struck him like a blade. Tomaso's breath faltered. The Inquisitor had discovered his weakness, the daughter hidden with his sister in the countryside. Don Matteo leaned in closer. "You see," he murmured, "even the proudest philosophers bend when those they love are at stake." For the first time, Tomaso's resolve wavered. He looked at the parchment again, tears welling in his bloodshot eyes. To sign would be betrayal, of truth, of everything he believed. But to refuse might condemn his daughter to a life branded as the child of a heretic. His hand shook over the paper. The ink dripped like blood. Then something inside him hardened. He looked up at Don Matteo and whispered, "My daughter will live free if truth lives." And before the Inquisitor could react, Tomaso hurled the quill to the floor, splattering ink across the stone. "You cannot command the soul." The chamber fell silent. Don Matteo stared at him for a long moment, the calm returning to his eyes. "Then the soul will be broken with the skull," he said. He turned to the torturer. "Prepare the device. Tonight, he will confess in iron." As Tomaso was dragged back toward the darkness, he glanced once more at the window, at the faint strip of daylight cutting across the floor. For a fleeting moment, it looked like a quill of light, drawing something unseen upon the stone. Perhaps, he thought, truth had many ways of being written, even in silence, even in pain. Behind him, Don Matteo sat again at his desk, dipping a fresh quill into ink. He began to write his own version of the confession, shaping Tomaso's words as he wished them to be read. In his eyes, it was not falsehood, it was order. And in the dungeon below, as the torturer cleaned the crusher's threads with a rag, the fortress prepared for another night of screams that would never reach the stars. Night fell heavy over Florence, cloaking the fortress in black silence. The wind howled through the cracks in its towers, carrying with it the faint smell of rain. Inside, torches flickered against damp walls as Tomaso di Fiori was dragged once more to the chamber of iron. His head throbbed with each heartbeat, the world swaying between light and shadow. The torturer led the way, his heavy boots echoing like drums of doom. Behind them, Don Matteo followed, calm, deliberate, robes spotless as ever. The head crusher waited on the table, gleaming under the torchlight. Its screw had been freshly oiled, its chin rest polished to a cruel shine. The sight of it sent a ripple of dread through Tomaso's veins, yet something inside him had already gone beyond fear. He had seen the edge of pain and stepped past it, into a cold, clear defiance that no iron could break. Don Matteo spoke softly. "This is your final hour, Signor Di Fiori. The Church offers one last mercy, a confession to cleanse your soul before the turning begins." He gestured toward a parchment resting nearby. "Write one sentence. Deny your false wisdom, and you will die swiftly." Tomaso raised his battered head. His eyes, swollen and bloodshot, still burned with a faint light. "You call mercy what you cannot understand," he rasped. "I will not confess a lie." The Inquisitor sighed almost regretfully. "Then let your reason be crushed with your skull." He nodded once. The torturer seized Tomaso, forcing him into the iron chair. The leather straps bit into his chest and arms as the cold metal cap descended again, fitting over his torn scalp like a crown of agony. The screw loomed above him, silent, patient, hungry. Don Matteo crossed himself. "Begin." The first turn came. The cap tightened, pressing bone against bone. Tomaso's body stiffened, but he made no sound. Blood welled slowly at his temples. The torturer waited for a sign to continue. Matteo's eyes remained fixed on the prisoner, his expression unreadable. The second turn groaned through the chamber. Tomaso's teeth ground together. A strangled sound escaped his throat. The pain was immense. Every nerve in his skull screamed, yet he clung to a single thought: truth must survive me. He whispered it between gasps, a prayer to reason itself. Don Matteo leaned close. "You could end this, Tomaso. Speak one word of repentance." The scholar's lips curved into a faint, broken smile. "I pity you," he whispered. The Inquisitor's eyes darkened. "Tighten it." The third turn came. The bones of Tomaso's jaw creaked under pressure. Blood poured from his ears. His vision fractured into blinding light. His body shook violently, but still no confession came. For a brief moment his mind drifted. He saw his daughter running through fields of sunlight, her laughter echoing in the wind. He wanted to hold that memory one last time before it faded forever. "Enough," Don Matteo said at last. "He will die before he confesses." But before the torturer could release the screw, Tomaso's trembling voice broke the silence. "Write this down," he rasped, each word a gasp of blood and air. "Write that truth cannot be crushed. Not by kings, not by priests, not by iron." The Inquisitor froze. His hand twitched at his side, torn between fury and awe. He stepped closer, looking into the dying man's eyes. And for the first time, Don Matteo felt something stir within him. Not pity, not guilt, but fear, the kind that only truth can create. Tomaso coughed violently, blood spilling down his chin. His head slumped forward. The Inquisitor whispered, "Stop." The torturer obeyed, releasing the screw. The cap lifted, and Tomaso's broken skull glistened in the torchlight. He was barely breathing, yet his lips still moved, forming silent words.